Hey guys, just an update for the people who are interested in the stopping smoking thing. It's been 4.5 weeks, so it's been over a month since I stopped. And yeah, I've got to be honest guys, there is still times now where I still have to fight the little fight. I still get the little demon guy in my head telling me lies occasionally. But it's become less and less, and the arguments become really short. But the truth is that still, after 4.5 weeks, maybe not every day now, but most days, there's probably a couple of minutes out of the 24 hours in the day. There's probably a couple of minutes where I have to have some discipline, where there's just that little voice in my head telling me again. So for example, yesterday I was at a wedding and there was guys going outside to smoke right outside where I was sitting. So they were going outside where I was sitting outside the window and standing there smoking. And there was a little part of me that was telling me that I wanted to go out and do it too. But I just told myself no. And just with the logic, it's just, again, it's the battle between the lies that little voice and those little images in our head are giving us, and the truth. And that's all it is. And because we're using the truth to battle it, it's not such a big fight, really. It's only a couple of minutes, and it's getting less and less. So couple of things I've realised lately that have really helped. One of them is it's not a nicotine addiction. You know, 30 years of smoking, 30 or 40 cigarettes a day, sometimes more. It's not a nicotine addiction because there's no nicotine left in my body after 4.5 weeks. But that little voice still pops up now and again. It's just habit. You know, there was at no stage during the last 4.5 weeks was I fighting an addiction. Even the first day or two, I wasn't fighting an addiction. I was fighting a habit. You know, if it was an addiction, I was only smoking. Like, you know, for a 1 hour a day. If you say 30 or 40 cigarettes times 2 minutes each, you know, I was only smoking for an hour or so a day. The other 23 hours a day I wasn't smoking. If it was a nicotine addiction, I would be happier with nicotine patches or nicotine chewing gum that can give you a huge dose of nicotine constantly. You know, and if it really was an addiction, then you know, most smokers would prefer patches and chewing gum because it'd give us a more constant flow of nicotine. So it's not an addiction. It's absolutely not. It's a habit, you know, and I think it's the habit of doing it, and it's something to do. And I think in our busy lives, it gives us it just gives us something to do so that we feel like we can relax, and we've got something to do while we relax. So an example is sitting in the car here. I've been pretty busy today running around doing some stuff, and get back in the car here, and I'm okay now just sitting in the car driving the car. But the struggle was, for the first couple of weeks, was in the car. I can sit in the car and, you know, taking a cigarette out of the packet and putting it in your mouth and lighting it and drawing on it and flicking the ash and putting it back in your mouth and handling it while I'm handling the car is a habit of something to do. It's a little process, you know, that you're doing until eventually you finish smoking it and you put it out. And there's that process, and I'm sure this is a big part of the habit. You know, another example is if you're at work, and depending on where you're working or what you're doing, but if you're somewhere, like the guys at the wedding yesterday, if you're somewhere and, mate, say for work's a good example. You're at work and you go, I'll take a break, and you go off to another room or you go outside, and the same thing, you get the packet and you take out the cigarette, and then you get the lighter, and then you light the cigarette, and then you smoke it, and then you deal with the ash. And you're smoking it, and you're dealing with the ash, and you're handling it, and you're doing the thing. And I think if someone said to you, what are you doing? You'd say, I'm smoking a cigarette. Whereas if you're not a smoker, what are you going to do? You're going to say, I'll be back in a moment. And you go outside and you stand there. right? And for a non-smoker, that's probably an acceptable thing to do. Go out there and stand there and look around. But for a smoker, you know, I'm pretty sure that habit of dealing with that cigarette, that ritual, the ritual of smoking the cigarette, becomes an important part of us, becomes an important part of our personality, you know, so that, you know, when we're taking a break or when we're talking to someone or when we're on the phone, that was one of mine. I used to do the ritual all the time when I was on the phone. Someone would call me, I go, "Hi, how are you?" And the other hand automatically is reaching for a packet of cigarettes. You know, because it was my ritual. If I was on the phone, I was smoking a cigarette, basically. It just sort of, for some reason, the ritual went together with the smoking the cigarette. Or drinking alcohol, or, you know, a million other times, a million other things in my life where smoking a cigarette ritual was part of it. So, you know, I'm convinced, guys, that that's all it is. It's all it is. It's just the habit. It's the ritual. Becomes part of our thinking. And I think that's why for people stopping smoking, that's why it's difficult, because the habit and the ritual is so deeply embedded in our lives. You know, that's why I had trouble at the wedding yesterday. I didn't want a cigarette. 4.5 weeks without a cigarette. My body doesn't need nicotine. You know, my body doesn't need nicotine. It's clean. It doesn't need nicotine. So there's nothing to do with that. What it was I was watching the guys outside doing the ritual. You know, and I can remember that ritual. You're sitting in the room hanging out for a cigarette, and then you get to go outside and have one, and you do the ritual, and it's like, wow, I can do it. That's what it was that my brain was saying, oh, that ritual, yeah, that's good. But no, it wasn't. So what I said to myself while I was sitting there is, wait a minute. Those guys have been sitting in that room, in that wedding reception, hanging for a cigarette for an hour and a half, not quite relaxed, until they had a chance in the goings-on that they could go outside and have one, and they were scurrying. You know, after the first guy went outside, the others saw him and went, right, we can have a cigarette now, and all the smokers scurried outside to have one, because those poor guys were hanging out, you know, and I can relate to that. They'd been sitting there for an hour and a half without a cigarette, and finally they got a chance to have one, and they all barreled outside to have one, and they had one, and then they finished it, then they had to come back in again, and then, you know, half an hour later, oh, they're hanging again, and out they go again. I was there for 4 hours, and I was relaxed for the whole experience, because I didn't need to go outside and have one. They were hanging out, so in other words, they were hanging out for, you know, we were there for 4 hours. Those guys were probably outside for 10 or 15 minutes of it, and that 10 and 15 minute period of the 4 hours was the only time those guys were feeling relaxed. And the rest of the 3 3/4 hours of that whole thing, those guys weren't feeling relaxed, were they? Because they were hanging out for a cigarette, because they couldn't smoke inside. I was relaxed for the whole 4 hours. Except, to be honest, except for that 1 minute or so, when I had that little argument in my head with the demon. The demon saw them standing outside and went, oh, I want to be out there with them. And that's when the logic had to step up and say, no, you don't. No, you don't. That's just a habit. See, it was just the automatic habit. And again, what I'm finding is that slowly these habits are getting unprogrammed. So it's what I'm finding is that each time where the ritual is part of my life, the first time I'm in that situation without smoking is difficult. So, as I mentioned in the other videos, when I first stopped smoking, every time I drove the car for the first couple of days, every time I drove the car, I wanted a cigarette, because it was part of the ritual, drive the car, smoke a cigarette. You know, and it took a few days of driving the car and not smoking for me to rid myself of that habit and that ritual. And now when I smoke the car, I don't think about smoking it. Now when I drive the car, did I say smoke the car? Now when I drive the car, I don't think about smoking a cigarette. And then, you know, after eating, well, that didn't take long, because, you know, I eat 3 times a day. So it took a few days, and, you know, finish eating and not smoke. So it took a few days for that, because it's breaking the habit of doing it then. So then it's not a habit, right? So it was my habit to smoke when I was driving the car. Now it's not my habit. So I don't think about it. It was my habit to smoke after eating. Now, it's not my habit because I've broken the habit. I've been 4.5 weeks of eating and not smoking, so it's well gone. I mean, it was only a few days, really, the eating one. Only took a few days. And, eat and, cigarette. No, fuck, no, I'm not doing that. And it was only a few days, and then it wasn't a habit. So slowly, the different ones, I went to my favourite shopping centre recently, big shopping centre, and it was always my habit there that there was a smoking area, and I'd go and smoke in the smoking area, and I walked past the smoking area for the first time since I've stopped smoking. I went, and the little guy goes, "Go in there and have a cigarette." And I no, it stinks in there, and But my point is that it's just a slow process of we have to be patient. We have to be patient and accept that there's going to be times. So for me, yesterday was the first time I've been to a formal thing like a wedding since I stopped smoking, and seeing the smokers outside smoking. That was the first time I've experienced that, being in a formal situation where everybody's having, drinking, and it's all very formal and all very serious, but you can go outside and have a cigarette and escape it all. And it's the first time I've faced that since I stopped smoking. So there was that minute. But seriously, guys, it gets easier and easier. It's not that hard. It was only 5 weeks ago that I was about to stop, and I was freaking out. I understand you guys are still smoking. I understand how you feel. 5 weeks ago, the thought of stopping freaked me out. Absolutely freaked me out. The thought of trying to lead my life without smoking was just too much, and that was only 5 weeks ago. And and I mean, I've made all those other videos. You guys, if you haven't seen them already, you can watch them. But it's just the way we approach it. It's just the thinking. It's all in the mind. It's absolutely all in the mind. It's not a physical thing. It's all in the mind, and it's all a matter of logic and using intelligence and logic to overcome. There is not one true thing about the smoking that is a reason to keep doing it. The little demon inside my head that's popped up, from the first day of not smoking until now, that little demon that pops up has got nothing, has got no argument. There is not one logical, good argument that little demon can give me. And that's all we got to do is just look at it logically and go, no. And know when we're lying to ourselves, because we do. We really do, and I suppose different people would tell themselves different lies, but the little demon pops up and says, go on, have a cigarette. I had a bad day a few days ago, a little bit too much pressure, and, a little demon popped up and said, have a cigarette, that'll make you feel better. Actually, I'll tell you guys, let me just tell you share another experience with you. What I've noticed too is the heaviest times where I've had like high pressure days or a bit of stress come, or a bit of pressure, or had a bad day. You have a bad day for whatever reason. And I had over the last 4.5 weeks, I've had a couple of bad days, where I've been frustrated or down or depressed or not happy about something. It's life. It's what happens. And I became aware of the fact that, of course, when that happens, that little demon goes, go on, have a cigarette. Go on, have a cigarette. Go on, have a cigarette. And what I found was happening was, sometimes in our minds we can justify our bad mood. And what I was doing is I was justifying my bad mood. I'm pissed off because of what that person did, and because of that problem with that damn computer, and because I can't smoke. And I was using the I can't smoke thing, I was adding that into my list of excuses for being not happy. And I thought about it later, I thought, no, that's not true. Because if I smoked when I was feeling down like that, it wouldn't make me feel better. It wouldn't. It'd make me feel worse, wouldn't it? Right? So I think what's happening there, and this is what people say when they stop smoking, don't they, is that I was okay, and then I had a really bad day and I started smoking again. I was okay, and then I had a big fight with my boyfriend or a big fight with my girlfriend and I started smoking again. Or, I was okay and I didn't smoke for 2 weeks, and then I had some big problem at work and I started smoking again. Oh, it's too much stress. And it's also, I found that's been an excuse that lots of people give for not stopping. Oh, I can't stop at the moment because my life has too many problems. There's too much stress at the moment. I can't stop now because I've got too much stress. And I think what's happening is the tobacco doesn't relieve stress. We've already dealt with that. That's bullshit. It doesn't relieve stress. It doesn't help us relax. That's all bullshit. I'm more relaxed most of the time now than I was when I smoked. So it's not true. It's not true. It's not true. Look at your friends that don't smoke. They're not going, oh, I need a cigarette to relax. It's not true. But we use that excuse that I need it to relax, or that I can't stop because I've got too much stress in my life, or I'm going to start again because I've got too much stress in my life. I think what's actually happening there is that lie and that fight that's going on is we think it's adding to the stress. We think, I can't cope with this stress because I'm trying to stop smoking and it's all too much and I need to start smoking again. It's not true. It's only because we're letting ourselves get distracted by that fight to have a cigarette, because it's our habit that when we're having a bad time we smoke. But the truth is, life has its ups and downs, and you know, that doesn't change whether we smoke or not, unless some of the side effects of smoking means that our life gets worse, health or whatever, relationships, whatever. But smoking doesn't improve that. Whatever our normal life cycle is of good and bad, it doesn't improve just because we smoke. You know, so it's bull. That's bull. That, you know, the smoking helps, and it does, and so it doesn't help us relax. It doesn't mean we have less stress in our lives. I think the only problem is that when we're stressed, that it's harder to have that logical argument, because we're not listening to logic, and we're all emotional, and we think we can lie to ourselves and tell ourselves it's going to make us feel better. It's just bull. So anyway, what I found was when I had those bad periods where I just really want to go to the convenience store and buy a packet of cigarettes, I'm having a really bad time, I'm just over it, I don't care, you know, that's where we have to use our discipline. And it's only for a couple of minutes. It really is, guys. It's only for a couple of minutes. If you use your discipline and your logic, if you just use discipline alone, you probably have to discipline yourself 24 hours a day, which is too much. But if you use discipline and logic, it'll only have to be at first it was probably 2 or 3 minutes. This is the truth, I swear to God. You know, going from 30 or 40, 50 cigarettes a day to 0, the discipline was really only 2 or 3, 4 minutes a day, or 2 or 3, 4 minutes a time. So, you know, have that fight. Oh, I want a cigarette. Oh, he's having a cigarette. I want one too. No, I don't. That's not going to make me feel good. And that logic, all the logic we've talked about in these videos, for 2 or 3 minutes, and then it passes and you forget about it. And then, you know, maybe an hour later, a couple of hours later, you have it again for 2 or 3 minutes, and then it passes. And then each day it becomes less and less. And then some days now I'm not even thinking about smoking, and some days now maybe once or twice a day. Yesterday was maybe once or twice. And that discussion has got down to 30 seconds. Oh, cigarettes. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. And that's how short that argument's just got shorter and shorter and shorter. So that argument's got less and less often, and shorter and shorter period of time. So it's down to just a few seconds now. Oh, they're smoking. Oh, I want to... No, I don't. And it's over. So my point is, if you use the logic and the intelligent part of your brain on that lying bastard demon part of your brain that's lying to you and trying to justify that habit of smoking, if you use that logic, the discipline is required is much less. It's not much. If you look at this 24 hours in a day, if you need to have some self-discipline for a few minutes a day, you know, for 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes a time, a few times a day, it's nothing, guys. And it gets easier and easier and easier and easier and easier, and then most days you don't even think about it. And if you do think about it, it's 30 seconds. Compare that to when you're a smoker. How much discipline does it require to be a smoker? How many times a day are you in a situation where you can't smoke? Where you've got to have discipline for an hour or two a day because you're a smoker and you're in the habit of smoking and you want to smoke and you can't because you're at work, or you can't because you're at school, or you can't because you're in the train, or you can't because you're somewhere else. I mean, how many hours a day, you guys that are heavy smokers that really hang out for a cigarette, how many hours a day are you being disciplined because you want a cigarette, and you can't have one? So if you're talking about the fight and the discipline and how difficult it is, it's more difficult to be a smoker than it is to not be a smoker. It requires more discipline to be a smoker because there's all those times a day where you're not allowed to smoke and you want to. Whereas now, look at me at the wedding yesterday. You know, those poor guys sitting there, you know, they spent maybe 10 minutes outside smoking, and the rest of the 4 hours they're sitting there hanging out for a cigarette. You know, and I was sitting there for 4 hours, I was fine. I had 10 seconds of discipline. Oh, look, they're smoking. No, I don't want to do that. And it passed.